It's you.
What's going on, man?
Goodness gracious. It is good to see your face.
You too, dude. I was thinking about this. I don't think I've seen you in person since 2014, maybe. You were in Dallas or something.
Would it have been? So I left Arkansas in 2014. Wait, that's when you were in college.
Yeah.
You were at DBU.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen you since then. That's 9 years.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, so I've been back to Arkansas a couple times. You've practically been gone since 2013. I mean, summer, Christmas. When did you leave Texas and go to California? We're diving right in, but like, when did you go to California?
Yeah, I moved to California in January 2018.
Oh, geez.
So I graduated college in August of 2017. I did a brief layover in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Yeah, you did.
For about 6 months. And then I moved out here January 2018.
Okay. I met you in 2007, and is when I started. June of 2007 is when we started at Indian Springs, and you were in 7th grade.
Yeah, whatever year it was corresponds to what grade I was in. So I'd have been in 7th grade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That helps. That's because you're young. You were. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you went to. I want to say that the moment that I really got to know you and Trey, who we've interviewed, which I'm sure will come up, is Super Summer, like just summer camp. Like that was a great moment to meet you guys and get to know you guys. Man, I it's funny. I know you so well, but I'm trying to back way off. Give me just kind of a picture of like your family life, your church life up until that moment of like 8th grade. Cause you got saved. It was 8th grade, right? It was that 8th grade summer, or was it 7th?
Yeah. It was a summer between my 7th and 8th grade year.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Give us a picture of like your upbringing, family, all that.
Yeah. So I grew up in just a really stable home. My parents were always in church. And so that was a regular rhythm that we had growing up. I have a brother and sister that are 10 and 14 years older than me. So I came along like way later. And so a lot of my experiences are different than theirs.
Yeah.
I think my parents were a lot easier on me than they may have been on my brother and sister growing up. I got away with a lot more. That's yeah. But yeah, it was a really stable home. I mean, my parents still live in the same house that they, have lived in since I don't know whenever they moved to Bryan in the 80s. And so so it was really stable. I grew up in kids ministry at Indian Springs. You talked about Trey. Trey's my oldest friend that we met in the nursery at Indian Springs.
That long ago?
Trey and I, when Trey and I first hung out, wearing diapers and whatever else.
Causing trouble.
No doubt causing trouble. It by any standard was very normal. Especially for Central Arkansas. And I grew up in and around church, so that was nothing new, a family of believers and everything. But I somewhere in my middle school time, I have a rebellious streak in me that I, whatever I'm told is like, hey, this is the way things are. My first reaction, like, nah, probably not.
No, it's not.
And so somewhere in there, I started to ask a lot of questions. And what hindsight, what really was going on is I was just wanting to buck up against any, system in my life or any system of anything around me. Then I went to Super Summer. That was one of those that I had friends going, so like, oh, that'd be cool. And at the last minute, I was like, I don't want to do this.
Oh, really? Like you changed, like you didn't want to go last minute?
Didn't want to go last minute. Wow. And my mom said, I paid for it, you're going. I said, okay.
That's good parenting.
Fair enough. And there at that point, just remember just so vividly, Alex Hamaya was preaching the gospel, and the end of that first night, I just remember just so clear that God grabbing my heart when it felt like the first time. I had been wrestling with salvation and what that meant, and I kind of gone through this whole, like, I remember at a point where I had the thought of I don't know if I'm saved or not, so I'm going to say a sinner's prayer every day my whole life, and one of these is going to count.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy, and as that is, I remember God just really opened my heart to him that night and grabbed me and was like, "Hey, I love you. I'm real. You need me. I'm here." And I remember sitting down and praying, and was like, it was just a really simple prayer. It was like, "God, I don't understand all this, but I believe you're speaking to me. I believe you're real. Please save me." And that just totally changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
Just from that moment. And so, that was super summer. It flipped everything for me. Even I was 13. So, as much as a 13-year-old's life can get flipped upside down from something like that, it's what I felt like was.
Yeah. Yeah, you became a new creation, and no one that was at Indian Springs in those days would say otherwise. So I think it's real special. There was some sweet moments that you and I got to spend together in discipleship, and so I got to watch it firsthand. So, I know that I was so proud of your parents for just prioritizing church and keeping that as a focus and allowing me to spend time with you. Chick-fil-A, I think you said in your survey, way too early in the morning before school. And so that was, I got to have this, I got to have this journey with you, which I thought was really special. Now, fast forward, you've been through discipleship, you're entering high school. You're able to step in our cell group leadership, which is kind of a program that we rolled out for 2 years in high school, and you're able to.
Can I put a pause in this for just a second?
Yeah.
To say something, man, and I'm like just feeling emotional just thinking about this, like that Chick-fil-A experience. Now, like that was just for context. Anybody hearing this, you grabbed me and was like, "Hey, I'm going to show you how to be a Christian." We had a whole curriculum of things we went through and things you walked me through at like 6 or 6:30 in the morning at Chick-fil-A every Friday for, I don't know how, quite a while that went on.
It was 12 weeks specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that was the most formative time of my life. And that, like, it's just all of the craziness of me, like what it felt like for me becoming a Christian, and not like everything felt was like, I'd heard all these things growing up. I've been in and around church, but now like I had this relationship with the Lord for the first time, and I don't know what to do anymore. I thought I had the whole thing figured out, and I tried to buck up against it and all that, and then all of a sudden now it's like this is all just feels so real and different. I don't know what to do. And dude, you grabbed me and just walked me through just all the basics, but that's a foundation of my whole faith, and like all of those things that you taught me about how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to journal, all of those things, how to share my faith in it. That's a foundation of my faith now. And it's I've talked about this when I share my story of how I became a Christian. Like that, this is one of the first things that always like, hey, my youth pastor, he grabbed me, like he showed me how to be a Christian, how to walk this life. And I have I told that story to somebody in my church here now, and he like that man, he told me, he's like, hey, that man loved you. In a way that a Christian, like an older Christian brother, can love a younger, like he loved you in it. And that is a special thing. And dude, I had to just tell you, man, that changed my life because of what the Lord did in that time and the things you walked me through. So that was the most, again, foundational and formational season of my life as a new believer. And that's,
well, dude, my highest honor, thank you for saying those words. I'm thinking about how couple things. I knew that was important because I had that. I had that on my youth pastor, Danny Anderson.
Yeah.
And I've told the story multiple times. It's like, I didn't drink coffee and I didn't wake up early, but he got me to do those two things, right? I met at Starbucks before school. Right. And sometimes, like in the summer, it was lunch at a Mexican restaurant. I was all about that. But he would literally like just teach me God's word. And I'm so thankful for that. And out of the abundance, the overflow of just gratitude of that, like it pours out, right?
Yeah.
And I hope to talk about kind of what you're involved in now. And just for everyone listening, I haven't even caught up with you in long, like I've got your survey results, but like, I can't wait to hear the nitty gritty of what you're all involved in now. But here's my point. I will just be straight up honest. Okay. So we started meeting, it would have been 2009,
8 or 9, probably 2009.
yeah. And so I remember week one of discipleship is always like, what is this? Where are we going or whatever? I've learned now, right? Week one is like, what does this look like? What does it feel like? By week, 5, 6, like you're building. By week 10, you're kind of like, you're deep in relationship together. You're walking together. I learned that for the first time with you. So there was a little bit of like, little bit of guinea pig going on there, and my life was changed. My life was changed in those days. And which is why I will just say, like, discipleship is Christianity, right? Like discipleship, obviously there's other, but like discipleship, like it's not lost on me why Jesus, like Great Commission, would include that very important word, because that's it. That's it. And I think that one of the things that I learned in that time was preaching on a stage. It's awesome. It's good. It has its place. It's not discipleship. It's not life on life. It's not, it could, it's like we had a one-on-one thing. Could it be me with 2, 3 guys? Yes, it could. But like, even like in small group, like it's better than a sermon, but then the one-on-one thing, it was life-changing for me. So, it was life-changing when I received it. It was life-changing experiencing, guiding. So anyway, well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate those were some of the sweetest days that I've ever experienced. Now out of all that, right? You're involved in student ministry leadership. You're involved in like the club at school. What was it called at Bryant?
Youth Alive.
Youth Alive. That's right. Youth Alive. So it was just like Christian club, kind of like a FCA type deal, which really I thought made some waves. Like, and it wasn't just you, it was like a group of students leading that thing from multiple churches. I'll also say one of the things that was sweet about those days was we had a real friendship between churches. Like the youth pastors we were all friends. We used to meet at Starbucks on Wednesday mornings. This wasn't for my whole 7 years in Arkansas, but there was a sweet little season of about maybe 2 years or so where we would all gather and we would just catch up. We would pray for each other. We'd talk about what we're sharing about that night. And I think there was a genuine like love and respect and friendship to now, right? In 2023, one of your friends growing up, Seth, is now the youth pastor at First Southern, right? And you've got even like a kid younger than you. He's at James Lasley at Indian Springs doing kids ministry. You've got John Venable, who used to be a youth pastor. He's the pastor at New Life. You've got Peter, who's the pastor at First Southern. You've got Casey, who was he's at Geyer Springs. Like there's still that still some really good stuff going on there. It's kind of a whole transition of leadership has happened at Indian Springs. So Tom retired and kind of new leadership coming in. I've heard, man, I still follow Indian Springs student ministry, and it just seems like they're busting at the seams. So anyway, this is no one other than me and you listening right now, like understand the context for all this. Like they're like, hey, why don't you edit all this out, because we don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, I say all that to say this. Those were sweet days because there was friendship between the churches, between the youth ministers, between the students, and even students from different churches partnering to lead a club. I thought those were really, really sweet days. Now, I want to talk about youth ministry. Let me scoot past it really quickly, because I kind of want to get from your high school graduation to where you are now. So give me kind of a little glimpse. You were interning with me my last summer there. That was incredible. But what did you high school graduation and now?
Yeah, I was with college in Dallas. And
how old are you now, just for everyone listening?
I am 28.
28 years old. Okay. So you went to college in Dallas.
Graduated high school 2013, went to college in Dallas, Texas. Graduated from DBU. So did a brief layover in Alabama, and then went in January 2018. I moved to Southern California to go to seminary. yeah, I've been here ever since. So that's been about 5 years now.
When you were in California in seminary, because
Mhm.
okay, you were a part of like a homeless church, right?
Yeah. That was in Dallas. Yes.
That was
Yeah,
Dallas. That's
West
right.
End
Okay. All
Church.
right. All right. This was going to say these are different churches. Okay. So tell me about like what drew you to homeless ministry. And when I say homeless ministry or homeless church, I mean, describe what that even is.
Yeah. So it was a church we met outside in downtown Dallas, and we with homeless folks. Started a church. The church was about a year old when I got there, and they started because there was a population of homeless people in downtown Dallas that either churches didn't welcome them or they didn't feel welcome going inside of a church building and that kind of thing. And so there's this huge population of people that didn't have a church. And so this group of folks from Dallas decided they were going to plant a church in Dallas,
Yeah.
and
How'd you
or
hear
plant
about
a
it?
church for homeless folks to do that. I was at DBU. They did basically like a church fair, involvement fair kind of
Oh,
thing. So there were churches, there were different organizations from the community and campus organizations and the clubs and that kind of stuff. They were all together as part of the welcome week for first year students. And I was in line for free Chick-fil-A, just the way you get, college students to do anything.
absolutely.
And yeah, so they ran out and they was like, "Hey, give us 5 minutes, we'll be right back." I was like, "Cool." I didn't know anybody and had anywhere to go. Classes hadn't started yet, so I'm like, "I'm just staying here. I don't have anything to do." And where I was standing in line was where the booth for this church was. And I talked to this person named Laura Castillo. I talked to her for that 5 minutes. They have a 5 minute like elevator pitch for West End Church and what they did, what that was about, and gave me a flyer. And I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." I'd kind of been involved in homeless ministry before, and I liked it a lot, but I'd had it in my mind when I moved to Texas or moved to Dallas that I was going to go to a mega church with a famous pastor and all that kind of stuff. So the first couple of weeks I visited a couple of churches, but a flyer sat on the desk in my dorm room. And I just like felt the Lord just keep telling me like, "Hey, you belong. You need to be at this thing. You need to
Wow.
go see what's going on there." And so I went to visit, and just first week just felt like the Lord was like, "Hey, this is it. This is where you need to. This is where I want you to be while you're here." Made some really great friends there. David Miranda was the pastor there at that time, and was founding pastor and leader of that church, and
Yeah.
still a great friend of mine. And so like where the Lord was calling me, and so I just like, all right, this is it. This is where I'm
Yeah.
at.
How long were you
And
there?
4 years.
For
4
all
years
four
I was in
years, man.
college. Mhm.
That's crazy. Was it ever bad
So
weather where you were
yeah,
outside?
oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So
So
look,
when it's like raining, what
whether
happens?
yeah, it kind of depends on the situation. It's kind of a week to week thing. There was another ministry, I can't remember what it was called or whatever, but I think they may have been Catholic. I don't remember, but they had a chapel that they didn't use on Sundays. It was
Oh,
downtown.
okay.
It was like a smaller thing that was like kind of like a multi-purpose room kind of thing. And they would let us use that on Sundays if the weather was bad. So if it was cold or raining or whatever, we'd go in there. Or before we found that, there was a McDonald's downtown that we would, grab as many homeless people as would come with us, and we go pack out a few booths and that kind of thing at a
Yeah.
McDonald's and hang out there. And so
Okay.
yeah, yeah, Lord always provided, always made a way for it to work.
That's
It was
awesome.
never conventional, but it was always great. So
Okay. Okay. So tell me, you're at, you moved to California, going to
mhm.
seminary, and was it always Story Church, or were you a part of a couple different churches, or was it, always Story?
Yeah, so first 6 months or so I was here. I kind of bounced around a few different churches and was
Sure.
trying to find a church, and it just, coming from the different experiences that I had, it just nothing seemed to fit. And so I met through seminary and some people, Church Planting Network, North American Mission Board, all that whole thing. But someone there introduced me to one of the pastors here, Travis, and I met him. He was in Dallas. Him and another pastor were both in Dallas at the time. They're both from California. And this is we're in Rancho Cucamonga, California,
Mm,
about 40 miles east of LA. And that is Pastor Travis. That's his hometown. But they were both at a church in Dallas. And I feel like I was calling them to come here and plant a church here and everything. And so they hadn't moved back yet, but he gave me Travis's information and connected me with him. And so Travis called me Had about a 30-minute phone call with him, and it was one of those, maybe, Mark, you know me, sometimes I can get excited and make impulsive decisions. At that time I was starting to become aware of that, and so going into that phone call, I was like, all right, I'm gonna, this guy is, church planners are excited people, especially on the front end. I've been around enough church planners to know, like, he's gonna have a really great pitch for this church, and a great vision for this church. And so in my head I was like, all right, I'm gonna hear this. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to make any kind of commitments or say anything like that going in. And at the end of that phone call, I was like, hey, God wants me to do this, man. I'm in with you. Whatever that looks like. So yeah, committed to Story Church then. And I was at another church here called Foothill Church. So we have two sending churches, one from Dallas and Foothill Church here.
Okay.
So kind of our mother church in Dallas, the village in Dallas, and then Foothill Church here is our local sending church. So our Travis and Stephen are their pastor. Came to Foothill. They were on staff at Foothill as church planting, like residents or something like that, for 6 months or a year or whatever, before they launched Story Church. And so I was, yeah.
And then how long
so
did it
at
take?
Foothill for about a year, but
okay. And you're on staff now. So like, when did that happen?
I am on staff now. Yeah. So the church launched October 2019.
Wow.
And I was
if anyone is thinking and tracking timeline, that's a 6-month head start on COVID.
Right. The worst time in modern history to plant a church. So October 2019, the church launched, and I was, just a guy going to the church. I was one of the first members of the church, and part of the original launch team and all that kind of stuff. And so, but yeah, then COVID happened in February or March 2020. Everything shut down, the whole world shut down and all. And our church has started to have a lot of momentum to start. People would kind of, from connections from either they're fans of the village or came from Foothill, sent some people with them. And there were just other connections and stuff happened in the area. The church had a lot of momentum and a lot of people showing up really quickly. And then all of that momentum, March 2020, just took a shot. So yeah, kind of shut down, turned into an online church for a few months. But in that time span, so at that point, when COVID happened, I was a graduate assistant at California Baptist University. So I was I worked in the International Center there as a part of my grad program in seminary, which is not at CBU, but anyway, I was part of I was doing work there. And then my job was to plan big events for international students. And March 2020 happened, and pretty quickly, CBU realized they did not need big event planners anymore for the foreseeable future. So I got laid off pretty quick from that job, which was a bummer. At the time, it was a bummer. I loved that job. I loved my time there, but that definitely was a bummer. Got into the summer, and still, I mean, jobs were not, just widely available. And just to tell a quick story about honestly how cool this church is. People from my home group that I was in, they were, all a few years older, a few steps ahead of me in life, and not much, like 5 or so years older than me. But anyway, they kind of got together, decided like, hey, Scott got laid off from his job. I just told them, hey, just pray for me. I don't know what's going to happen. Everything's in disarray right now in the whole world. And they're like, hey, we know you're in seminary, trying to figure all this out. We're going to pay your bills for the summer. And they took care of me like literally financially supported me for a summer, which was incredible. And just like the generosity of the people in our church, and just the way that God has moved and worked here, just the church in general, and then in my life specifically, was crazy. Yeah, kind of got towards into August, and in my seminary program, I had to do a year-long internship, and so I asked if I could be an intern, or at the time was an online church, and like I don't know what I could do. I had some ideas. I wanted to start a young adult ministry or college ministry. Starting a college ministry when there's no students on any campuses anywhere was still a terrible idea. But I came on as an intern then, And yeah, a few months later, they asked me to come on full time. So I'm not doing college ministry. Still kind of in the works of trying to do something like that.
Yeah.
But
What is college ministry like? Just still very heavily on your heart?
it is. I kind of with international or at CBU and that when I was in Dallas, my role at that church, what started as doing homeless ministry, what it kind of turned into by the end was college ministry because we had a bunch of college students coming to serve there, and so I was helping lead college students in serving and learning how to share their faith with them and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of did that in Alabama as well. And so in all of that time, as I loved college ministry, I still love college ministry. That's not, again, I came on at a time where there were no students anywhere, but that are on any campuses and anything. So I fell into some other stuff on other parts of ministry that I'd never done before. Didn't envision myself doing, but
Sure.
I see hindsight, God's hand in preparing me for that and growing me in these areas of. So I'm communications director now
That's awesome.
at this church, and so I do things like design. I plan events and do like that kind of stuff. I lead our production team. Just doing all the behind the scenes stuff is kind of my a lot of that is my area.
That's awesome.
Which is again, it's like it's a really important part of a life of a church that and it was all stuff that I'd like had experienced like small pieces here and there with even like I used ProPresenter for the first time as a student at Indian Springs and like learned it there, and now that's a big part of my job. All of that kind of stuff is unique ways that God was preparing me for a role that I didn't envision for myself, but He's just doing really cool things. So I realized in my internship, it was just gratefulness to these pastors here that they were just like, hey, you're an intern, like just try some stuff. See what works, see what doesn't, and see what you like, what you don't, and gave me a lot of freedom to just come up with ideas and try things. And they're like, hey, I think you have a gift kind of in this lane here. I want to like pull you in that direction. And so
Well, I think
that's kind of how I ended up here.
I think that communications is actually very, very important in the life of a church plant. As a guy who planted a church and who struggled like to get the word out or to, so there's things like production, but there's also things like marketing and promotion. And marketing seems like a big bad word when it comes to church. We've all seen it done kind of gross, but to be able to be a part of a team that's getting the word out about the church in California, like it's an incredible opportunity. It's a different angle than you're used to. But it's still nonetheless, important. So that's incredible. Yeah. So let's dive into your survey results. I think all of that helps. First of all, it helps me a little bit understand kind of like, what you're up to, helps people understand kind of where you're coming from. Obviously there's deep, Christian training through school and seminary. There's discipleship. You've had opportunities for student leadership and all those kinds of things. Your survey here reflects most of that. There's a couple questions here that I wanted to kind of talk about, and then I've got a couple follow-up questions. So
sure.
This is, I think, maybe the most interesting. In what ways have you changed your beliefs since your youth ministry experience? I'll just kind of read your response here and I'll kind of let you go. Okay, so I've changed on some secondary and tertiary issues. I've moved to the Reformed Baptist camp, so Calvinism, elder-led ecclesiology, Acts 29, blah, blah, blah. In the grand scheme of things, these changes are minor. I still fall under Orthodox Baptist evangelical beliefs. Okay, so talk to me about kind of like maybe even frame like where you feel like you were versus where you are now, so that people kind of have an understanding for that.
Yeah, so as you read that response, it was like, man, I used a lot of not just loaded words, but very like those are not like audience friendly words.
It's all right. I mean, I understand. Okay, so essentially what you're saying is, you've moved to an area where so there's the Calvinism thing is the big word there that if people don't understand, like if I was to boil it down to a sentence, you've got Calvinism on one side, you've got Arminianism on the other side. Calvinism would say that we don't choose salvation. We never chose to get saved, that God chose salvation for us in a sense. And so on one end of the spectrum there, you've got that God gave you the gift of faith and you responded. And then if you want to go full full Calvinism. There's you had no choice in the matter. God predestined you and there was no choice or whatever. Where on the other side of in Arminianism, there's the total, like, not only did I choose Jesus, I could unchoose Jesus if I want to. And, it's kind of like, it's all like, we have free will, and all this kind of stuff. And so I said one sentence, what a lie. But that's kind of the idea. And maybe kind of backfill some of that. Where do you think? And elder-led ecclesiology, I'd love to hear more about too.
Sure. Yeah. So where I kind of came from, in a place where I remember in high school, we did these Sunday night things where you just kind of gave us the floor to ask questions about a lot of different things. And the Calvinism, Arminianism thing was one of those. And that was the first time me and I'm imagining most of the students in that room had really thought about that question, or were really exposed to those kind of thoughts. And so before I say anything else, I'll preface, I remember in the middle of those conversations, I had a brief conversation with Brother Tom, who's the pastor at Indian Springs until about a year ago. He asked what we were talking about, and I told him, we're talking about all that. He goes, "Well, did you figure it out?" I said, "No." He said, "You're not going to. Don't worry."
Oh, man, that's such a good response. Yeah.
Like, that's great. And so while those kind of things are important to me, those aren't, like, that's not the primary thing.
Sure.
The primary thing is still the gospel, and Jesus is the Son of God that died for our sins and rose on the third day, and all of, like, those primary things. And so this is stuff that it affects my life and my belief and those kind of things. This is not the main thing. And so I'm much more like want to be known for being a believer in Jesus and a follower of Jesus than a Calvinist per se. But this is also important to me. Kind of where I was in that time, I was, asking a lot of those questions. I had never even really thought about it. I was like, well, Bible says to get saved, so I got saved. And this, like, I don't really know how that happened. Did I initiate that? Did God initiate that in my heart? Like, all
most
that
eighth graders don't quite know how to delineate theology. So
right. Yeah. It was a lot of like, just trying to, like, I don't know what any of this means. But I do remember something that swayed me kind of in that time, is I had a friend that passed away that was not a believer. He passed away pretty suddenly, and there'd been a lot of, between either me or others, had a lot of attempts to share the gospel with him, and he did not come to faith. And I remember stepping back and be like, "God, how did you let this happen?" It was a lot easier for me to accept that God, or this guy rejected God, than it was that God didn't choose him. That kind of a situation. And so that was what happened. That's kind of where I was at. I kind of went down that because it was emotionally was easier for me to accept.
Sure.
And then as I felt like some healing from that time and from all of that, I kind of got to a place where through just reading scripture and discipleship and all of that kind of stuff that I was like, man, I don't think in my own sin and my own junk that I could choose God. And I believe I'm not on this hyper Calvinist side where it says I had no choice in the matter. I believe there's some mystery, and that God calls us to salvation, but we also he gives us a choice in it at the same time. And I'm not going to pretend that I know how to flesh all that out and how that works. It's just, I'm kind of comfortable saying there's mystery in there, and that's okay. But that's kind of, I've felt more on that side. And I'll tell you just one of the things that, and this is probably too, is an emotional. So I'm a very emotional person. So and so this is kind of probably sways me more than I'd like to admit.
For sure.
But one of the things that put me in that spot was I read a book called Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. Came out 2, 3, 4 years ago, something like that. It was incredible. It's a story about, or no story, it's just a book about who Jesus is and his love for us. And in that, one of the things, I think it was in that, and if it's not, it should be, so whatever. It pointed out.
Dane, are you listening?
The thing that pointed out was that in the story of the prodigal son, the way that I had always kind of heard that taught or that just that way. I just assumed that went was that this guy ran away from God. God called him, and got a mess in his sin. He came to God, and then God saved him, and there was a party and all that kind of stuff. But it pointed out to me was it's not a story about a new believer. It's a story about someone. The son was already a son when he ran and took his father's inheritance and went into sin and all of that. He never stopped being a son. And that's not a story about somebody coming to faith for the first time. That's a story about somebody turning from God and coming back. And that's God's response to believers that he loves and cares for. It's not like, I 100% believe that God, when people come to faith for the first time, there's a big party in heaven and all of that I 100% believe that. I think we see that other places in scripture, but I think this story of the prodigal son is about God's response to believers and when they repent from their sin. And in that story, the father didn't care about all the excuses and the explanation and all of that. He was just glad that his son came home.
Yeah.
And so in all of that, I saw that and I was like, okay, this is what this to me saying that God, in my sin, I couldn't have chosen God. And if I could lose my salvation, I would. But this is God's response to us every time we repent and every time we fall into sin, whether it's big things or big seasons or years or whatever of sin, or just the small everyday things that we fall into. That's God's response to repentance. He's waiting for his kids to come home.
Yeah.
And he's always excited about it. And when in that sold me for that side of things, and that because to me how beautiful that is, and that you can make the argument that any other side where pseudo-Arminian side, not quite the like I can choose to walk away from Jesus side, but the belief that like I can choose God, but God doesn't will never let me go. I can't lose my salvation after I've chosen that. Like you can make the same argument, and that's fine. And I respect that, but that's where I fall, and that's kind of how I landed there.
Yeah, that's good. Easily one of my favorite portions of scripture is the prodigal son, Luke 15, just incredible. So elder-led ecclesiology, meaning talking like the church should be led by elders as described in the pastoral epistles. And right. So I guess would you say that's like, as opposed to what?
Yeah, opposed to congregational ecclesiology. And so to kind of sum up a little bit of what that congregational is kind of what you would think about like kind of old school Baptists and kind of like Indian Springs, the way that they kind of do things, or at least did, where they would vote on everything, or the congregation would vote on everything. There's committees that make decisions for all these things, and they vote on who goes in the committees and this, that, and the other. And then the elder-led, and just in short, is a called group of men that lead the church, and they make decisions on behalf of the people. So not, I kind of fell into that. And that's sort of just what I saw in scripture that in that, and that, people, we can affirm members of a church affirm who leads us, and trust a lot of their leadership. But if they start walking away from scripture, it's okay to remove them. So they make decisions on behalf of the church.
Okay. So what's interesting, I don't know if you know this, and I could be wrong. I did work there. Mm-hmm. Indian Springs was a pastor-led church, not congregational. Mm-hmm. However, Tom, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. Tom, our senior pastor, he always wanted there to be a vote so that the congregation had like a voice in it all. Okay. Getting really deep into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
that maybe I shouldn't say, but I'm going to, and maybe I'll edit it, maybe I won't. There was always one person who was the nay. Like, I'm telling you, we could say like, you know what? We would just love to vote for like, we just want to say that we want everyone to go to heaven. He'd be like, nay, it just seemed like he was always the stick in the mud. But it was pastor led. And so, I've been in churches that use the word elder, use the word pastor. They seem to be interchangeable in some ways. Don't want to get too into the mud in the New Testament there. But Indian Springs was an elder, a pastor led, and but they had these congregational votes to like at least make sure that the congregation had a voice, but also to, I think, get a feel for where they fell on things. So it does seem like essentially what's happened, and maybe you can comment on this, that you took your beliefs, and I don't know that you may have moved toward Reformed Calvinism.
Mhm.
I don't know that you weren't Reformed or Calvinistic when you were a
Sure.
teenager. And so it seems that you've probably grown in that, grown in your understanding
Mhm.
of that, and maybe even more committed. Am I wrong, right on that?
Yeah, no, that's probably spot on. It took some time of like just, also just learning and understanding what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like what does Reformed theology mean? Like what are those words? Um, but I was prone to that already.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind
You
of was
gotta, I mean,
bent
Tom,
that
our
way.
senior pastor, was Calvinistic.
Hmm.
I was,
Hmm.
I became more Calvinistic in my 7 years. In fact, I remember
Sure.
vividly, we did a series in Acts one summer, and it was just like all summer was Acts. And I remember we happened upon some verses that were like, I'll never forget. There was one vivid moment where there's a verse in Acts and it says, "And those who were appointed to be saved that day were saved." And I was just like,
Mhm.
well, it's there. So we got to
Hard to
deal
argue
with
with
it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. And if anyone's listening and is kind of being shaken up by that right now, I would just say, like, for sure, explore it for yourself. Understand that the reason we joked about it earlier, where Tom asked if Scott figured it out. So the church has been, arguing about this for centuries,
Yeah.
and I don't expect to figure this thing out, right? I think that we're going to get to heaven. We're
Yeah.
going to be like, oh, okay. Gotcha. Even your like explanation of the prodigal son, I think is very helpful. Like a son is a son is a son. There's a song by Kane right now called "I'm So Blessed." We've been singing it in our student ministry. And there's this one lyric that's just amazing. On my best day, I'm a child of God. On my worst day, I'm a child of God.
Oh,
And
that's
so
great.
there's this,
Yeah.
this kind of idea, that, and I hope that sinking into our students' hearts, I don't know how
Yeah.
much students can really grasp onto that. And I think that's the point of what I'm trying to bring out here is because so much of this interview seems like Mark and Scott are just catching up, but I want to get to these points so that we can grasp this one thing. Scott Workman, you were like a super devoted teenager, and you were involved in like student leadership, and just you were taking the steps. And in so many ways, I was just like so excited to be like a small part of your story. But at best, you were 18 and your brain was not fully
Yeah.
developed. And you had so
Right.
many experiences to go on, and even to this very day, you're 28, and you're still learning. I'm 40 and
Mhm.
I'm still learning, right? In all the ways that we're like, okay, in what ways have your beliefs changed? I think the thing that I'm concerned about, if I can segue a little bit, which it's perfect that you're in California, because the rest of the union is looking at California and we're saying, y'all have some pretty whacked out beliefs in some areas,
Yeah.
especially the red states
Yeah.
looking at California. There's a common phrase in
Right.
Texas: don't California my Texas, right? A lot of Californians
Right.
moving to Texas,
Yeah.
don't, whatever. But
Yeah.
here's I guess my question. You've got some really conservative evangelical beliefs in a very
Mhm.
not conservative culture.
Sure.
And not even just 2023, but like California. What's it like there? What's it like being, and you keep mentioning the Village. I mean, plenty of people listening to this are familiar with, and we're talking about like the Matt Chandler Village, right? The Village Church. Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously like Matt Chandler has some, like there's roots in conservative theology at Story Church, and
Sure.
in your heart from where you grew up, but you're in a pretty, we're trying to find the question here. What is your perception on where we are in 2023, not just in our culture, but in church in
Mhm.
2023? What's your heart for the church? What's your heart for kind of the place that we found ourselves? Wherever the Lord takes that answer, I'd love to hear your heart. This is what I've been
Yeah.
looking forward to this whole time.
Yeah. So I've got a few thoughts. One of the things that has started to concern me in when I was in high school, which is thinking about now, was how intertwined church and our faith and patriotism kind of got.
Woo.
Um, And that's a
Keep going.
hot topic right now. It's a hot thing.
It's come up at least twice on this podcast in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as a high school student, I read my kingdom is not of this world and this is not our home and that kind of stuff. And so I just kind of double middle fingered everything. And was like, America is not my place. I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and was very not discreet about it and did not know how to handle myself. Remember, I like to buck up against it, be rebellious, and so that was kind of my place of kind of doing that in a lot of ways. But now kind of where I see that, whether it's the way people talk about politics and all that kind of thing, whether you're on a conservative or liberal side of politics, is people Christians will put their politics above their faith. And it's kind of stuff we were talking about earlier too. They put their political party above the primary things. They put it above the gospel, and they make political agendas gospel issues. And I don't generally, most of the time, they're not. Almost never are they. Do they equate as the same thing? And so I think one thing that I just kind of see is people dividing in the American church, dividing over things that are not worth dividing over, caring too much about things that aren't worth caring about. And instead of, linking arm in arm or instead of pointing out all the reasons we're different, we're not linking arm in arm saying, hey, we're in this together for the gospel. These are the things that unite us. Be able to point out all the reasons we're different instead of doing that. And that's something it's concerning. And it's for, just my relationship with other believers, with churches together, and all of those kinds of things. And, I think most evangelical churches in the U.S. have more in common than not. And that's the kind of stuff that really bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you asked about it's like being a believer in California, a church in California, and all that kind of stuff. This is odd. This area of California, this kind of pocket, is oddly conservative.
Okay.
But outside of that, you interact with all kinds of people that have all kinds of different beliefs and different things, and that are involved in some stuff that it's really out there. I think what I get wrong a lot, and what I think I see people get wrong a lot in the church, is they look at people and they want to fix them to get them to the gospel. I'll use the big example, the LGBTQ plus.
Yeah.
Right now, believers in the church will look at gay people, or they treat people in that community like they have to fix them before they could come to church, before they could come to the gospel. And that's just opposite of everything we believe. We believe the gospel transforms everything. We can't change it all without the Lord. And so that's the kind of, that really gets me fired up, is when I see believers, the way that they talk about people that are different or that have different beliefs. I'm like, oh yeah, lost people are going to act like lost people. Of course they are.
Right.
Like, we're, the only reason we're better is because of Christ. We're not better. Sorry, let me go back on that. We're not better. The only thing that's separate, that's different, is a relationship with the Lord, is the saving work of Christ. All of the wickedness that you can imagine, I think we're all capable of all of it. And the only thing that's saved me myself, like, from all sorts of crazy wickedness and stuff in my own life, is Christ and Him, the people He's put in my life and the work He's done in me. And we were talking about earlier, the foundations of discipleship and stuff that you did with me in 2008, 2009. Like, that's the difference, the work that God has done. And without that, like, I'm not any better. I'm not any different than anybody.
Right.
And so I think believers in our culture forget what it's like to be lost. They forget what it's like, or they just don't think about, so they put agendas and behavior modification above faith and above the gospel. If somebody comes to faith, the first thing, I'm not worried about who they're voting for. Theologically, I'm conservative. I don't give a crap about Republican or Democrat. That's not my thing. That's the stuff that concerns me about church and faith. And I think when that really bothers me, sorry, I'm going to get just into some stuff here. The stuff that bothers me about the way that people that from the areas that I grew up in, from the South, and in our country in the South, that are other more politically conservative states, will look at California. It's like, oh no, that's a place that is shunned, belong here, nothing. Like, God is he's doing things here. He's doing incredible things here. I was looking at this, our church, and like the ways that God is moving and working in our church and in the city, like it is incredible to see. And like we need more churches here. We need more church planners here. We need more believers coming to be missionaries here. And if we, or believe ourselves to be gospel lights to this world, and if we really believe that God has called us to take His word to the end of the earth, sometimes to the ends of the earth for us is down the street. Sometimes it's in California, and you got to go, move from your conservative, comfortable pockets of Texas or Arkansas or wherever else, and come plant a church here, come be a part of a church here, come be a missionary in this area. I mean, people are a lot more. And I think even thinking about Baptist life and SBC life, I don't know what your church is a part of that or not, but people are really excited about the IMB and the things that the international missions that are happening. And that's amazing. 100% yes, be excited about that and support that. But it's okay as long as they're another foreign country and they're not part of us. If they're, as long as they can kind of think or like believe or something that's whatever as long as we can Americanize their faith and that kind of thing. But they're cool with sending people to the ends of the earth, to the foreign countries as missionaries. But they think about California and like, oh yeah, there's all these pagans out there. Well, yeah, there's pagans out here, and they need the gospel as much as anybody else. Anyway,
I wish you were more passionate. Just the one thing I wish, man, I just wish you were more passionate.
That's my problem. Is lack of emotion. That's my
lack of emotion.
Long been an issue of mine. Yeah.
No, I so agree with you. And I just for those who were not around to watch Scott grow up, I mean, I'm just looking at someone who is faithfully. I mean, I'm like emotional thinking about it. Faithfully walked out this journey, and I mean, I almost want to play a clip of you preaching, because I am looking at the same Scott, just growing in maturity, and in depth of belief, obviously, but still that same passion. And so man, I tell you, I mean, I came off the church plant, scenario because we closed the doors of our church plant. We've talked about that. But you've almost got me ready to move out to California and plant another one. I'm loving.
Come on, brother.
Loving what you're saying. Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you have any role? Okay, so tell me what community looks like for you. First of all, you're married, right? And when did you get married?
Yeah, I got married this past June.
Well, congratulations. What does community look like for you in your church? First of all, there's I guess your age group, but do you have do you have any role in youth ministry, college ministry? I know you've got a job at a church. So when you're on church staff, volunteering is kind of a funny in between or whatever, but you've got community. Are you serving in any sort of next gen role or anything?
Yeah. Not serving in any next gen roles right now. I had, but pre-COVID is serving in the church. I was doing kids ministry. I was just one of the room volunteers that served in kids ministry.
Yeah.
And that was not, it was not a good fit. I
was going to say, did they let you preach? And you're like, you've got to get saved. You got to get to California.
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah. No. And so my wife at the time, we were not dating at the time, but she was one of the teachers that she'd come in the room, and she tells a story. One time she walked in and I was just huddled kind of in a fetal position in a corner, and there were 5 or 6 kids around me just kind of throwing stuff and whatever. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. Anyway, yeah, so our church, we've just launched a youth ministry this past fall. Full-time youth guy that just came on. He started as the same kind of track I did. He was a seminary student and started as an intern, started a youth ministry, and just within the last month or so came on full-time.
Oh, wow.
Leading youth ministry. Yeah, so it's really exciting. So that's all very new. I don't have a lot. I'm not really involved in that at this point. I'm been talking with some people from there's local college here called Chaffey College. They're starting a chapter of Crew there.
Okay.
And so I've been talking with that guy, and praying with him and in starting points of getting involved with doing college ministry and stuff there. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the next gen stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
when you think about, I just kind of want to wrap up with this. We've heard your story. We've heard kind of the upbringing. We've heard kind of what your life has been like past high school and not just serving and volunteering, but you're on staff. Your heart was set on fire by God for the gospel in early, like middle school, high school years. And then you've been growing ever since then. Here's the big question that I want to ask you. If you were sitting in front of a room of like 1,000 youth pastors that represented all the youth ministries, 10,000 or whatever the number is, what would you share with them is like some of the most important, like, and based on your own experience, because that's all you can offer, based on our culture today, obviously, what would be like the one thing or two or three, whatever, what would you share with those youth pastors to say, like, this is something you need to prioritize in student ministry to help these students grasp onto the gospel?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot and listening to this podcast and thinking about all of that and what the deconstructions, how that started and kind of what's, just from my perception, what's happened. Two things that I would think about that. Number one, is make the gospel the center of everything, of all of it, not just for people to come to faith, but what the gospel means after students become believers. And it's just that same, it's that story of the prodigal son, where God, when you fall into sin and come back to God, he's ready, arms wide open, running to you with excitement and embrace. And I think I struggled a lot as a student in college and everything, is thinking about God like he was a disappointed father. Like he looked at me and he said, I forgive you, but I'm upset. I'm mad at you. And when that flipped, again, the story promise, so that just like that turned everything upside down for me, and the way that I believe in that is the excitement that God brings to us anytime we come to him. He doesn't see our sin or our mess. He just sees the righteousness of Christ coating us. And that's the first thing. And then to me, when I think about my life and times when either walking most closely with the Lord or most far away from God, the times I was walking most closely with the Lord, I had godly men investing in me close and personally. And so when I was a student in youth ministry, that was some of our group leaders. Think about like Patrick Martin and James Stearns and some of those guys, and Bubba Hudson and some of those other guys who really invested in me and my life, and kept me in a straight line, and helped me not to fall off into some of these crazy directions that I was prone to. And then the times when I was in my life when I felt like I was wandering from God, I didn't have anybody investing in me like that. And there were I remember there were times that I knew there were men that wanted to invest in me, and I just kind of stiff-armed them. And those are times that I was walking farthest from God. But I think about now, like, experience out like here, like pastors, one in particular, Pastor Stephen, is very involved in my life and everything that's going on. Like him is another mentor I meet with, Todd. And these guys very involved personally in my life, and they like into the nitty gritty and the deepest parts and even the ugliest parts. And they help walk me through things and help keep those guardrails up. And when they see sin in my life, they call it out. It helps steer me back and keep pointing me back to Christ. And so I think about what, for me, from my experience, what I needed and what I think, frankly, I feel like everybody needs, not just students, but they need godly men and women that are a few steps ahead of them in life, investing in them, and helping keep those guardrails up, keep pointing them back to Christ. Maybe boldly but lovingly call out sin when it needs to be, and celebrate the victories when they happen. And just keep coaching and loving and mentoring, discipling, step of the way. And that's, to me, that's probably the biggest difference. And the reason that I'm following the Lord now, is because I said the foundation that you laid in that 2008 or 2009 and throughout my high school time and the people invested in me since then. That's what I really believe that's what God has done, and I believe that's what's so important for student ministry and just in general is for believers is to have that.
So good. That's so good.
So,
man, thank you for taking the time. I'd be remiss if I just didn't tell you how proud I am of you and just how you've stayed faithful. I think of even this term like perseverance of the saints. This idea that when someone becomes a Christian, that God holds on to them. But I remember learning kind of in a deep dive about that perseverance of the saints is really proven by the faithfulness, right? The perseverance of the saints is really proven by the steps that we continue to take. We wake up every morning, we preach the gospel to ourselves, we keep trucking, we keep moving, and we keep walking with Jesus. And you've done that. You've demonstrated that. And so I'm proud of you. I'm thankful for you. Dude, you are out there sharing the gospel. And whether it was in Arkansas or California or wherever, I'm thankful for you. And thank you for taking the time just to share with people. I hope this is a blessing to them. And so I really, really appreciate it. And sometime I'll get you out here to Houston to visit and we'll reconnect in person.
100%, dude. Yeah. Dude, I love you, brother. I'm so glad to do it. Glad to see you, even through a computer screen. So glad to see your face, man.
Yeah.
So, dude, again, so grateful for you.
Well, thank you, man.